by the military-industrial complex.
And now, the Taliban will pay a price.
Do we have the confidence to do in the Middle East what our fathers and grandfathers accomplished in Europe and Asia?
The situation in Afghanistan is deteriorating.
What I do oppose is a dumb war.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Boardwalk Podcast. This is episode 33. We will be discussing Operation Lone Star with frequent guest, friend of the show, Mik Lopez. And we'll probably get into some of the findings from the Washington Post Freedom of Information Act request regarding the Kabul evacuation. Real quick, if you're not aware, we did a Ask Me Anything or an AMA on Reddit this week because, well, we're millennials and that's what you do. And I think it was fun. There was a lot of good questions. There were a lot of dumb questions. There were a lot of interesting questions. I will say, I think after we were done with that, we actually responded to a couple hundred people. We plan on doing an episode regarding some of the more common questions. There are a couple misconceptions about the war that we haven't really highlighted in detail, so we'll be addressing that. I will say, if anybody who listened or who participated in the AMA is listening to this, there were quite a few people that disagreed with some of our thoughts on matters, and you're more than welcome to come on and we can have a conversation, right, and kind of get an idea of how you guys got to your line of thinking versus how we got to ours, because, well, that's kind of important. But moving on to the show at hand, Mik, welcome back for a third time. How you been, bud?
Hey, is it 3? I thought it was 2.
No, you've done 2
yeah,
already.
I think this might be the third one, Mik. Yeah, this is welcome
I've done
back.
2?
Yeah.
Well, I definitely have 5 in my contract, so I'll be sure to go back and look at that.
Yeah, you're not getting a pay raise.
Thanks for having me back, guys. Mik Lopez for everyone out there listening. I'm in season 1 a couple of times apparently. My background is I worked with Kyle, Stu, and Zach in Kandahar in the Kandahar Intelligence Fusion Center as a green shooter. And after that, I did some ISR consulting with other guests, Adam Mazel from season 1. And now I work in corporate America as a middle-level manager. So happy to be here.
So bringing Mik on, I was talking to him about something I had found on Reddit, of all places, regarding the Texas National Guard and what is known as Operation Lone Star. And Mik said that, well, he just had a treasure trove of stuff to discuss about it. And there were definitely some parallels that we could tie in to our time, both individually, the 4 of us, and as a military, our time in Afghanistan. So, Mik, I'm going to put myself on mute for a little bit and just kind of let you take it away if you want to kind of explain the concept behind Operation Lone Star and how long it's been around, the purpose of it, and we'll kind of go from there, bud.
Yeah, so quick background. When I was in the military, I was in the National Guard the whole time. So I wanted to first knock out just what the National Guard is. There's some misconceptions out there. There's some factual, kind of thoughts and stereotypes that are based in reality. So just want to give a quick breakdown. So the National Guard is one of the 3 components, the Army National Guard specifically, of the Army. You have, the regular Army, active duty, if you will, the National Guard, and the Army Reserve. So what makes the National Guard unique is the National Guard is actually kind of owned by a state. The commander or the chief of the National Guard for 90% of the time is the governor of the state that a person is either commissioned in or enlisted in. And what happens when you get activated for, active duty or federal service is you go from Title 32, which you're serving underneath when you're in your National Guard kind of drill status, to Title 10, which is what most of the Army is under, right? Including the Army Reserve. So what does the National Guard look like for an average soldier while they're not on federal orders? You do, typically 1 drill a month. 1 weekend is what it typically is. Sometimes it can be 6 days in a row. Sometimes it can be 3 days. It's really inconsistent, and it kind of depends on the unit that you're in. You can belong to a myriad of units, whether it's a light infantry unit. You can be anywhere from the company level up to division headquarters, where I spend a lot of time. You can do, aviation. Any MOS essentially is available in the National Guard, including combat arms, which is not the case with the Army Reserves. They're all support functions. The average soldier in the National Guard looks like America in general, the average slice of pie of America. You have working professionals. I mentioned myself, I'm a mid-level manager in corporate America. I was doing that towards the end of my time in the National Guard. Before that, I was a college student for a short period. I've had many college students as soldiers, and sometimes it's hard to be a guardsman in college. But you have other people, they work at car dealerships, doctors occasionally, lawyers occasionally. But you also have what are called guard bums.
He said it.
And we really want to focus on guard bums for this conversation. So a guard bum is someone who's in the National Guard and finds an opportunity to go on orders, is what it's just kind of referred to. And that's just saying, hey, Private Lopez, you have an opportunity to come work for 180 days and helping sort out the armory, getting it ready for an inspection. Do you want to do that? And I'm thinking as a private, yeah, that beats working at, McDonald's. So let me go here, get a quick pay bump. And you do that and you get addicted to kind of the money. It's kind of like contracting in a way. You just see quick, easy money. And then the time expires and you look at it and you're like, oh man, I got to find another opportunity to get on orders. So then you start looking around, who needs more help? What can I do to get on these orders? And so I was a guard bum for a while, actually. I spent about 7 years guard bumming. And at one point I found myself at a brigade headquarters just outside of Austin. And we did a civil support mission, and then we got this chief of staff that came in. I was working in the intelligence shop, the 2 shop, and he was like, I don't really care for a lot of people here, so I'm gonna not renew their orders. So as a guard bum, I was like, oh crap, what do? I gotta find a job. And then around that time, Operation Strong Safety was kicking off. This was 2015. Real quick note on that chief of staff. He later was kind of asked to retire from the Army, so his sharp complaint didn't materialize 100%. And then he was arrested for terroristic threats towards police officers when he threatened to lock himself inside his house and, blow himself up with homemade IEDs unless his ex-wife decided to drop the divorce. That was the kind of guy we're dealing with. Quality leadership. Fuck you, John Crossan. Anyways, so Operation Strong Safety was a mission that was created in 2015 by the state of Texas. At that time, Rick Perry was the governor of Texas. And most of you might remember Rick Perry had a lot of political ambition beyond governorship. He wanted to follow in W's shoes and go on to the presidency. So he did what most of us recognize as a political maneuver and sent troops to the border to help stop the influx of migrants and narcotics into the United States from the South Texas border. So I'll go ahead and any questions real quick, or I can keep rolling.
I don't have any questions. I don't think. I'm just that's interesting. What happened to the chief of staff there?
Yeah. Real slow guy.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that story before. But
I've got some thoughts on Rick Perry, but that's separate from this podcast. So
certainly,
I'll keep those for later.
Cool. So Operation Strong Safety was essentially what I was able to volunteer to go on. We had this guy who was a lieutenant colonel at the time in the Texas National Guard. He was sent down to the border to assess the situation and see if the Texas military forces or Texas military department could assist state, local, and federal agencies in any ways with this border crisis, as it was, kind of being called. And he said, you know what, I think if I had a battalion of soldiers here, we could assist these organizations by conducting what's called a screen, and we can go into that in a little bit. So they were just taking anybody and everybody. So I showed up. I was like, cool, I need a job. Here I am. But I showed up with, at that time, a fully volunteer force. And we were talking people that were like homeless. We had a guy that only owned a motorcycle, showed up with his T-850, like his whole rucksack on his motorcycle, drove out to the training site. And they were like, hey, how are you getting to the border? Because it's about a 5-hour drive to the border. And he said, yeah, I'm taking my motorcycle. This is an NCO, by the way. And they were just like, what? Okay, that's weird. Someone give him a ride, right? And that's kind of the makeup of like the guard I was referring to earlier. You can have a 50-year-old man that's a specialist, right? Just rando dude, joined for whatever reason, maybe years ago, just never promoted. But it's that night and you're walking, and this was on the old ACUs. You just see like a black dot right here and right here. And you're like, oh, here I go. Start saluting, and you see it's a specialist, and you're like, what the fuck? Get out of here, idiot. And then whatever. But yeah, that's the National Guard. So all sorts of crazy people. I did have a lieutenant in Iraq who was homeless, and he lived out of his, well, he wasn't homeless because he had his home in his camper trailer that he drove everywhere. He was also like in his 50s, former Navy dude. Sent an email directly to the chief of staff as a second lieutenant when he was like 50, of the chief of staff of the Army, General Casey at the time, and was like, hey, I heard your thing on NPR about, trying to quell the rates of sexual assaults in the Army. Well, here's a few pointers. And so that, rolled down. But crazy people everywhere. I argue that the regular Army has just as many quacks. They just have more direct supervision regularly.
This is a good topic for a future episode.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about the personalities, just like that you get to encounter, because I can imagine there's some interesting folks. There's like probably the guy who's like does like really well, like in the private world, but he's like a private, like in the National Guard or something, and he like employs like people way above him. Like, I don't know. It's just a strange little makeup of individuals, I think.
Oh yeah, definitely. So that's a good thing. So I get to, the Texas border, and real quick, so let's talk about geography. The region we're looking at covers Hidalgo and Starr County in South Texas. And that kind of is 2/3 of U.S. Border Patrol's RGV sector, RGV meaning Rio Grande Valley, or Rio Grande Valley if you're not local and you sound like an idiot. So that extends from Brownsville on the far east, where SpaceX has their current launch sites, and it goes west up to this lake, the south end of a lake called Falcon Lake, and a good landmark for that is kind of near Laredo, Texas. So it's pretty expansive. You have the Rio Grande down there, dense brush, a lot of wildlife sanctuaries, a lot of private farmland, and then a couple major metropolises there. The estimated population for the whole area is about 1 to 2 million, spread out pretty well. The major city being McAllen, Texas, Edinburgh, Texas, and Harlingen, Texas, besides Brownsville. But yeah, so covering essentially 2 counties in South Texas, and kind of the makeup of those counties is really essentially poverty. Those counties are frequently on the highest ranking list for teen pregnancy, school dropout rates, below the poverty line, all those statistics. But yet you have the influence of illicit money all over the place. So in this town that, has shacks that are falling over, right next to you have a Jaguar dealership, right? And they're there because the taxes are a little bit cheaper than going to the next town over, but still it's pretty crazy. Just, dynamic wealth and poverty on 1 5-minute drive. So we're at Operation Strong Safety. I started off there in an observation post, an OP, sitting on the border in a Humvee with an LRAS. And an LRAS, for those who don't know, is a really high-powered optic that can be mounted on something. In this case, it was mounted on a Humvee. And we're looking towards Mexico, towards the river, towards fields that are just north of the river, and we're conducting a screen operation, which is what I talked about earlier. And what you do in a screen operation is you're sitting in a observation post, Sometimes it's over, like we were sitting on top of a levee in a Humvee, and sometimes it's concealed, right? And you're just calling out things of interest, in this case, people or vehicles or objects that move past you, to a force behind you to interdict them. In this case, it was the various agencies that we were partnered with, whether it's local PD, Texas Department of Public Safety, Border Patrol, Customs and Border Protection, Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. The game wardens are out there. That's what I have right now for Operation Strong Safety.
So you guys are basically serving as like the early warning network for the forces that can actually like interdict people conducting illegal border crossings and the like.
Yeah, and it all came down to kind of the legal rights granted to any of these entities at a single time, right? So as National Guardsmen, our mission wasn't to go apprehend people at the time, but oftentimes we would have migrants come up to us and kind of surrender at our post. We would just call Border Patrol. They'd come pick them up, process them. They went on from there. Other times we would see narcotics loads coming in, call it in, and then someone would interdict that. But it was kind of a hodgepodge of things. So I eventually moved from an OP, and someone was like, "Hey, you're an intel analyst, aren't you?" And I was like, "Yes, I am." They said, "Would you like to come work in the S2?" And I said, "Yes, absolutely." So showed a little bit of, enthusiasm there and give a shit. And then eventually I found myself working in the DPS, the Department of Public Safety's regional headquarters. So this was Region 3, and that covers essentially the same area we described earlier. And at that point, I was working with a guy that everyone here knows, Lieutenant Colonel Leesman at the time. And we acted as intelligence advisors, to the Department of Public Safety, and we're trying to also branch out to the other federal agencies. But some things we witnessed while we were at that level: the feds don't talk to each other, right? And at this point, we start interacting with the FBI, the Texas Rangers in addition, and we would have big meetings that the regional commander would host at the headquarters. And everyone's like a real big howdy-doody cowboy, right? So the conversations would be like, "Hey, Brian, we're trying to take our boats down the river, but there's a shallow spot right there. So we was wondering if you could take your low draw boats and go past that." "Well, John, I think we might be able to do that. I'll give a call to Roger, and, I think we might be able to do that." "Oh, I'll appreciate it." All like country bumpkins, right? But we're talking at the federal level, at the state level. The local police weren't always invited to this. There are a few trusted agencies that were welcome, but for the most part, they were deemed corrupt, right? But the thing I haven't talked about yet is, what was the enemy, right? It wasn't necessarily, at least for me, my understanding, wasn't necessarily the migrant issue, right? Ours was what we were calling criminal insurgency, the narcos, right, on the other side. So we were trying to partner with the federales in Mexico, local police in Mexico, right, who, if they weren't busy, trying to avoid being killed in front of their house, were definitely not fielding phone calls from us asking for intelligence tips, right? But it was basically trying to take our understanding of fighting an insurgency on a border of some type, and trying to make these people that have just done criminal investigations in the past as intel analysts at DPS understand, how to fight this insurgency. Real quick, back to the meeting. Customs and Border Protection and Border Patrol, they didn't communicate with each other. Customs and Border Protection is actually the higher agency over Border Patrol. They didn't communicate with each other. Customs and Border Protection, those are typically the folks at the ports of entry. So if you fly internationally, you get your passport checked by a CBP agent or officer. If you're driving across an international border into the United States, they're doing that. Literally underneath the bridge, like 20 feet down, are Border Patrol agents that have zero clue what's going on upstairs. Their administrators never spoke. intel teams sure as hell didn't speak to each other. Their operations guys weren't speaking. Customs and Border Protection had helicopters that were flying around the POEs looking for people trying to bypass them that did not have any communications down to the Border Patrol agents on the ground or at headquarters in the rear, right? Big shock. Big shock.
It sounds like Afghanistan, man. Like when we'd have all these intel assets like circling overhead of all our Afghan allies fighting this intense ground battle down below, but you can't talk to them. Like, there's no direct route. Like, hey, good luck, fellas. We're watching over here.
Yeah, but the problem perpetuated across all aspects of this, right? And that's what we were trying to do, is trying to get these people to talk to each other. So I was talking about trying to help them, combat a criminal insurgency on a border like that. They would have zones split up. And oh, by the way, the Border Patrol guys couldn't figure out where their fucking zones were. So I was in a meeting one time where two sector commanders for the Border Patrol had a 30-minute disagreement about the border of their sector. And so it turns out no agents were patrolling that sector for like a month because they thought the other guy was covering it. Dumb stuff, whatever. So we're trying to teach them to do very basic stuff that we understand in the Army as intelligence analysts. IPB, intelligence preparation of the battlefield, or IPOE, intelligence preparation of the operational environment, whatever you prefer. So typically there's 4 steps to that. I won't go too far into it, but the last one ends with trying to predict what the enemy's going to do based off of intelligence that you have or just known qualities and traits, and then setting up just what are called named areas of interest, NAIs, to try to figure out, are they going to take option A or option B? And it's a physical option. Are they going to go left on the road? They can go right on the road, right? That's a very simplistic look at it. So our goal was to get them to create, that's called an event template, to create an event template so that they can assist their operations assets in, actually being efficient, because they would have, let's say Zone 3 had at one point, 500 pounds of methamphetamine and 10,000 pounds of marijuana that passed through it in like 2 weeks. And they would be briefed in this big meeting that I was talking about. And they would say, okay, cool. Yeah, thanks. Or they'd say, oh, that's, yeah, right on. Okay, so we're just going to go ahead and still have everyone in Zone 2 because we think something's coming there. We're like, you fucking idiot. Move the people where the dope is, if that's what you really want to do, is interdict dope, right? But again, trying to educate beat cops and troopers that don't even work on the border, because they're traveling down 1 week at a time, driving from all reaches of the state to get down to the border to do a rotation. And they're like soldiers. They forget shit at home. One guy forgot his duty weapon at home and got yelled at in the operation centers. One dude, he damaged his vehicle, left it at the shop on the border. He was in New Braunfels, Texas. If you know where that is, that's about a 5.5-hour drive from the border. Got his buddy on his day off to drive him down so he could pick up his car. Turns out they hadn't even worked on it. And then, this state trooper major's yelling at these troopers, why didn't you call before you did this, right? They're just acting like soldiers. If you've ever had soldiers, it's the same conversations you've had with them.
Well, what does it look like? You said you're hanging out in a Humvee. You got the optic on. What does a drug smuggling thing look like?
Well, yeah, great question. So let's start from the Humvee out, right? So everyone's on their fucking phone. That's not supposed to be there while they're on the OP, right? So that's the first and foremost thing I want to cover. You're on an OP, and depending on where you're at in this area, you may have open agriculture fields by you. And with this LRAS, again, badass optic, you can see for 5-10 kilometers easy. It has, electro-optical, which means a daytime TV, and infrared, which means IR, nighttime TV, right, to simplify it. And you can shoot grids on it, so you can figure out where people are and call it up to headquarters. That's basically going to look the same if you're looking at migrants that are crossing in or drug loads, at least what these OPs are seeing, right? So bale of marijuana, it's not very concealable. It's usually floated across the river in a raft in blind spots. They're known blind spots. By the way, DPS and Texas Parks and Wildlife constantly, they have these, DPS has these giant boats that were designed for the Gulf of Mexico, gunboats. They have like 5 240s on them with like shields, with like bulletproof shields on them, and they launch them and they go up on the river, but then they just, fly down, park, hang out for a bit, eat lunch, and then drive back, right? And meanwhile, like all the coyotes and smugglers are just literally sitting on the bank of the river in Mexico just waiting for them to pass, and they go by, and no one calls it in to say, hey, we saw someone at this location. I digress. So if someone's walking with a bale of marijuana on their back, it's a huge box. It's bigger than like a standard military rucksack. They're carrying about 50 pounds. It's gigantic. So they're just kind of going till they can get to a safe house of some sort where they can drop it, and it can be processed into smaller quantities and transported usually by car or vehicle into the United States. Otherwise, the harder stuff like heroin, methamphetamine, we didn't see as much cocaine when I was there. That stuff is, you can transport in quantities small enough where it can be hidden in vehicles. So that was stuff that was usually found by like Customs and Border Protection or by, DPS actually doing something useful, pulling over brown people in this instance all the time. I'm kidding. But no, pulling over cars that look suspicious and conducting an investigation and finding, illicit substances in those vehicles.
So you say hidden bodily, like how are they finding? Are they typically finding people like transferring, say, balloons hidden in people's
the old prison pockets?
Yeah,
the old prison pocket. I'm sure they did, but that's a quantity that's probably small enough where like it's just getting put into the sum total that's briefed at kind of the region headquarters, and less so of a SIG act, right? A SIG act, because they love to brag on themselves, right? There was a DPS trooper who one day pulled over a car in Starr County, and he found like $400,000 in cash. The very next day, he pulled over a different car and found $600,000 in cash. So they're like, this trooper is the $1 million man. He's the best thing just out of the academy, blah, 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 right? So they like those stories, which are cool, But yeah, I don't know. If you're putting something in your butt and it gets found at like, all I can think of is like an interior border patrol checkpoint, which is like 50 miles inland on one of like the 2 roads that you can go on. Yeah, they find it, they take it, you probably go to jail. But I've talked a lot about OSS. I want to keep the ball rolling. Let's move on to Operation Secure Texas, which was the next iteration of this border mission. Still Rick Perry at the time, right? So Operation Secure Texas has a really cool logo that's kind of influenced by the Whataburger logo. I know because my friend that I made designed it on PowerPoint. She was an intelligence analyst for DPS, and they use her to do graphic design. What's new, right? Afghanistan all over again. It's all cyclical. But Operation Secure Texas is just a transformation of it. They added agencies, they added powers, right? Not much changes, except in 2017, Colonel Wiesman and I, we go to Afghanistan and meet you guys. And then, pause real quick. Let's talk about the border and military influence there. So for the longest time, there has been a military presence on the border in the form of like a counter-drug program, which is also a state-based thing. And essentially you can be like, hey, I'm a guard bum. I'm looking for some perpetual orders to try to retire on. Counter-drug sounds cool. So then they like embed as like secretaries and stuff at like police agencies and law enforcement agencies. And sometimes they do cooler things. But overall, counter-drug, epic waste of money, just like the war on drugs in general. So here we are, Operation Secure Texas is going on. And then March 2021, now Greg Abbott is governor of Texas. Texas is just 3 months prior gone on a 6-day power outage in which a couple hundred people died. And Greg Abbott says, my number one priority is the security of the border, right? So he starts Operation Lone Star. And basically what Operation Lone Star did for the National Guard, specifically in Texas, was increased number of troops on the border. It was kind of, for some people, an involuntary thing. They said, hey, you're an infantry guy. You're going to go live in what's essentially a fob on the border, like 10 miles from this town. And you're just going to like work here, and you're not going to get passes and go see your family that's 4 miles or like 4 hours away in San Antonio. Go do that. But they also deputized these soldiers under the Department of Public Safety, from what I understand. So that enabled them to conduct arrests, to like chase people down on foot if they need to. They're carrying weapons 24/7. When I was part of Operation Secure Texas and Operation or OSS, right? We had weapons, but we checked them in and out of the arms room when we got, to work, and then when we were leaving after shift. A lot safer. So what's been happening with Operation Lone Star is a lot of criticism for poor planning, poor execution. There's been a really high rate of suicide and self-harms. I don't know the actual number, maybe like 6 at this point, 4 to 6, too high, 4 to 6 too high, right? Disgruntled soldiers, people actually losing pay because they were involuntary pulled to the border. My coworker, for example, one of my peers, he was on the border before. He had, I don't know, probably like a 60% pay cut from what we're currently earning to go to the border, right? So some people are happy with it because they're guard bums, and or they're like 20 years old and they just got out of basic training and AIT or OSIT, and they're like, oh, finally I get to do something and earn some money. And they get down there and they buy a Mustang or they buy a Toyota Tundra on high interest. And I mean, it's the same thing over and over again. It's Afghanistan. It's Afghanistan.
It's like poetry. It rhymes, like they say in the red lights. But yeah, I mean, that sucks. I heard the pay issues are pretty bad. Like people getting paid like never or very rarely. Apparently they instituted some new pay scheme because I guess it's paid out by the state, not by the federal government. Like regular Army gets paid out.
Yeah, so the pay rate's actually different. You're on state active duty is what it's called. So you're not on the same pay rate as you would be normally. Your E4 through E9, O1 through O10 pay, warrant officers. You're getting paid at a different pay rate than you would be otherwise. I think up to like maybe E5, E6, it's comparable, if not better. But afterwards, you start getting a big reduction. But also, we talked about guard bums, and I'm going to keep talking about guard bums. You have officers like captains and majors that are just like losers, really, in reality, and are just like, working for the next paycheck, which, like, I get it. That's a lot of America. Like, grind on. Like, you go, King. I got you. But these guys are just like fucking weirdos. And they're like, I'm a captain here, and I'm making like the same pay as like a fucking 3-year E6, like, or I don't know, a 6-year E6, and I'm happy with it because I can do nothing better because I'm a fucking creep and no one will hire me in real life. That's what it's composed of, and as a result, you don't have always great leadership, right? You have fucking weirdos. At one point when I was down there on OST, our force went from about a battalion size down to about 200 soldiers, and it became very competitive for who got to keep their job, essentially. On the border, because once you're kicked off, you're not just going to another unit, you're just out of a job. So I stayed on because obviously I'm incredible and critical, but we went to like a super top heavy structure. We had 200 soldiers and we had 3 E9s on that on that whole payroll, right? How do they justify what they're doing down there to headquarters to say, yeah, all 3 E9s are essential for this task force of 200 people?
I've been to the border. There's no grass there to police. Now, why the hell are they there?
That's what I was going to say. There's no grass.
There's no grass on the border, dude. It's all desert, man.
A lot of rocks to paint, though.
A lot of rocks to paint.
I just want to give a clarification for listeners that may not be in the military. That just like the Sergeant Major rank E9 is considered by many to be almost entirely useless. So it's almost like a joke because all anybody knows them for is yelling at people to get off their grass. So for anybody not in the military, that's kind of the joke there. So
the fucking task force Sergeant Major, he didn't like me. He had it out for me whatever. Was I a little bit arrogant? Probably. I had boots that were within AR 678-1 compliance. They were the Belleville Minimils for anyone who remembers those. If they're still rocking it, rock on, King. But they're essentially minimalist boots that didn't have a heel. They look super cool and they're very comfortable. And he was like, Sergeant Lopez, those boots don't look like they're in regulation. I was like, well, they are, Sergeant Major. So, I mean, cool. And he was like, I want to see in different boots. And I was like, all right, cool. And I never changed them. And then he like saw them again and like waited outside Colonel Eastman's hotel for like 5 hours one night for him to like walk out to go to dinner. It was like, Colonel Eastman, I need to talk to you about Sergeant Lopez boots. And then I got chewed out for being a distraction. Right, whatever. So that was like a small thing, but he was kind of taking this attention and energy and just like directing it towards a lot of people. So if you're not in the military and trying to like get a good taste for what Kyle's referring to, that's it. One time I was sitting in a meeting, if you're watching the YouTube like this, I do have a gut currently, but before I did it, I was fucking nice. And he said, Sergeant Lopez, you don't look like a soldier. You're resting your hand on your gut. I was like, well, let's go on a fucking jog if you want to, Sergeant Major. And he's like, I want to see your APFG score. So I was like, okay. Weird shit. Okay.
I mean, that's something that people can identify with, like people in higher level positions not really having much of a job, and so finding something so it looks like they're working. I mean, that's definitely common in the military. Probably less so when you're deployed, but you see plenty of it.
It's probably one of my biggest criticisms of senior enlisted, especially in the Army. Great, you're really awesome at hitting like your NCOER bullets like right, spot on, doing all the, I forgot what it is now, like the salute or whatever, leads, all this shit. But can you contribute to the military decision making process, MDMP? Can you plan? Can you do any of that shit? A lot of them, no. Some of them, yeah, great. Thank you for doing your job and being a good motivator, being a good leader, and also being, that proper senior enlisted advisor and contributing your perspective when it comes to doing this planning. But you see a lot of guys, and I saw it in Afghanistan very often. Oh, fuck, in Afghanistan, we're getting ready to do a strike with this unit that had just moved from one talk to another. Like we're striking, like this is outside of Bagram. They're like number 7 guy on their, list, and like the strike's setting up. We're getting there, all the pillars are being checked off, and then the sergeant major walks in. He's like, I just came out of the old talk and it's not sweeped. I need 2 soldiers from every section to, on the double, go in there and sweep it up. And like the battalion commander is just like, get the fuck out. Like, go away.
And that's the problem with the Army, though, is it's just like any other organization. It's about like 10% of the people that do every bit of the work. So it's like, and then anybody that does work just avoids at all costs any of the people that don't actually contribute to the mission. So you just like avoid those people. And that was like, I was very proud to avoid most E9s in my time.
We talked about this with like when the 82nd rolled in, they brought in something around 20 green suiter analysts, and after about the second week, there were 5 left because they were all doing area beautification in fucking Kandahar. Right? That's a problem within the military for sure. I wanted to bring up. I sent this to Mik probably a week ago now, maybe 2 weeks ago. It's a quote regarding the pay situation on the for Operation Lone Star, and it's is there someone that lost money? Probably, but it's not different from any other deployment I've been on. That is a quote from Major General Charles Harris, who, when Stu, Mik, and I and Kyle were in Afghanistan, then Brigadier General Harris was the commander of TAC South.
I was under Henry.
You were there under Henry. You're right. You were turn 1. He was the turn 2 commander for TAC South. So as I assume he's the commanding general of the Texas National Guard.
So he's
or just the 36th.
Yeah.
ID.
So quick organizational breakdown. The Texas Military Department, or Texas Military Forces, if you will, has an adjutant general. Every state has one. In most states, it's usually appointed by the governor, the most qualified senior commanding officer. And some states, like South Carolina, it's an elected position. So they once had a captain that was the adjutant general that wore 2 stars while serving as an adjutant general, but otherwise was a captain. So they would go around wearing 2 stars. But when they went to an active military base, because it was a South Carolina appointed position, they had to put on their captain bars. So then you have a captain walking around with fucking lieutenant colonels saluting them and shit. Chaos.
Maybe the Army should try that out.
One of y'all's strong pillars is keep politics out of the military and the government. Well, the government, right? But keep politics out of the military. I mean, you're just inviting chaos at that point. Anyway, so that's the force structure, right? Is you have a 2-star adjutant general, the adjutant general tag, colloquially referred to as the tag. And under that, you have, specifically in Texas, full infantry division, the 36th Infantry Division, which also has a division commander that's 2 stars. So, right, on paper, they're equal, but the tag has the final say, right? And then under the tag on the other side, you have non-divisional forces is what it's called. And that's about the equivalent of 3 brigades worth of soldiers, and they do different missions. We don't have to get into that too much. But General Harris, from my understanding, is the division commander at this time.
I bring that up because I find it hilarious that he says that he is a named partner at his own fucking law firm. He's not hurting for money. Very, very unique perspective from the higher ups, as always.
Yep. Yeah, I think actually the guys that were on my rotation, with the exception of Ewan, I'll name him because he's a outstanding guy in horseman. We were all guard bums. The rest of us were guard bums. The next rotation, I think every single one of them was a guard bum.
Proud of those guard bums.
And it showed.
Yeah.
So like with Operation Lone Star, right? There's the pay issues, right? There's the suicide issues, and you talked a lot about when you were doing Operation Strong Safety with just like feds not talking to each other. That was 2015, you said?
2015, 2016, yeah. Think of OSS, Operation Strong Safety, and Operation Secure Texas in one continuation. They're like on paper different, but like in effect, very fluid transition.
So are those same communication issues present in Operation Lone Star? Or have they gotten worse? Have they gotten any better?
Undoubtedly. So
from what you know, obviously.
Yeah, I have a few friends that have gone down there. I mentioned a coworker, a couple other guys I worked with previously. And yeah, it's the same thing. Some stuff has improved slightly, but the issues that we're talking about, the most severe are at the state and federal level, federal to state. Those aren't problems that can be influenced to a positive conclusion by your boy and a gaggle full of other like military officers who are trying to do the right thing, right? These are permeating from the very top all the way down. Everyone's fighting for funding for the next year, so they want to have exclusive rights to report their seizures. They want to say they were solely responsible for success. And sometimes they're in competition with others who, may be able to get in a cut, if you will, of their success. And please don't think I'm trying to generalize across the board, because there are a lot of people out there that are trying to do the right thing in their eyes and trying to be efficient and trying to just make it better. But overwhelmingly, we're just dealing with issues with miscommunication, intentionally or unintentionally, no coordination or very little coordination, all sorts of stuff, antiquated tactics, antiquated methods. It's just a gaggle.
It seems like from what you've been telling us about it, that there's, I mean, it's shocking that our border like counter drug program is like functioning at all, given given the amount of the lack of cross communication and the lack of like you were saying, the boats just passing by potential coyotes without radioing anything in. So that's I don't know. It's a little shocking. I mean, for some people, I'm sure I had assumed that things were running a little more smoothly, but I guess with so many like overarching agencies that aren't really working together, you kind of have like a pre 9/11 situation where nobody's talking, and you might have the full picture out there somewhere, but it's across several agencies, and you can't really run the border efficiently that way.
I'd say think of it this way. You're seeing news headlines because there is a certain amount of success that will happen by default, right? You put Border Patrol agents on the border. People are going to walk up to them and surrender. They may see someone and interdict them, right? That's going to happen regardless at a certain extent. At that point, that's where, leaders come in and they say, hey, we can improve the efficiency of this and make it better, or, that kind of stuff. That's just not happening. And I think you mentioned counter drug, being just a perpetual thing. It really boils down to Texas government's right-leaning politics, where drugs are such a taboo thing that they don't want to think about. That they want to throw money at it rather than, I don't know, the power grid and improving that. But that's why counter drugs still a thing. That's why, this migrant situation, right? I know you guys have alluded to it before, right? Had the CIA not tried to overthrow a couple and successfully overthrown a few governments in Central America, where we have a strong influx of people who are really trying to flee their homes where they grew up and have family to escape that and try to seek a better life in the United States. Would that be happening? Probably not. That's my conviction.
But what about those people that can't make money selling cocaine through the government then? Like nobody's thinking about those people. So
the CIA is a failed jobs program. I was curious. I'm sure I know the answer to this already, but I'm going to ask it anyways, because I kind of hope the answer is yes. At any point during the daily briefings during Operation Strong Safety, did anybody just go, what if we just end the drug war?
No. Fuck no. Yeah.
But it would work. You'd have to find a different gig, but it would work.
It's like suggesting that we just pay the bad people $20,000 to not be bad anymore, rather than shoot them with a $70,000 Hellfire missile that we might miss with.
So I will say we kind of touched on the criminal insurgency earlier and the narcos, right? The cartels. That has become a problem that is like beyond. It's almost as complex, if not more so, than Afghanistan tribal relations, right? They're fighting with each other. You have the government of a sovereign nation that's combating it unsuccessfully, some would argue. You have the United States interdicting. And more so nowadays, we actually, since we kind of have wound down the global war on terror, a lot of that talent, if you will, analysts, human talent, and physical assets, meaning ISR, like airplanes, manned specifically, they're doing a lot more operations in Mexico, in Central America, and South America. Those resources then just disappear. They're going somewhere else, right? I forgot my original point. Oh, cartels. They're fucking crazy. They're terrible. When you're standing on one side of a border and you're not going to cross it, your ability to influence it is kind of mute, right? And this is the same thing we witnessed in Afghanistan when we talk about Taliban based out of Pakistan, right? Quetta Shura, the other Shura that I can't remember right now.
Peshawar.
Nice. Right, fighters coming across the border. It's similar, but different. But the challenges are still there, whereas the United States recognizes international borders, and we limit our influence over there, especially the physical influence, but we try to limit it, right? It's hard to combat what's going on the other side.
What do you have any thoughts on the whole wall situation that was sweeping the nation politically over the past several years? Like the effectiveness of it, and like is that a direction we should move towards, or not, and why?
Yeah. So, I mean, my honest opinion is it's a political stunt, right? So most of that region that I kind of talked about already had a border wall of some type in existence, and that was a flood barrier because the Rio Grande is a fucking giant river, and it floods all the time, and it's moving. It's a river. Rivers are crazy. So these flood barriers essentially were up to like 10 feet high, and then they had like another 10 feet of, non-scalable fence on it. People that really wanted to scale it were very good at just throwing down a ladder, jumping over it, and jumping down the other side, and disappearing. So yeah, I mean, it's when you're really looking at like the cost of constructing that stuff and like the benefit. You're creating a small like barrier, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's pretty fucking inefficient, especially for the cost that you're throwing down. And I also want to talk real quick about the Butterfly Sanctuary in Mission, Texas, which is a fucking wonderful place. It's mostly kind of run by volunteers that are old white people that retire in South Texas. And big surprise for anyone that is not aware, South Texas is primarily composed of Mexican Americans, right? But like my wife says, white people with money kind of make things happen, right? So they run this beautiful butterfly sanctuary. It's wonderful, right? And then the fucking QAnon conspirators they perverted it, they ruined it, and now like you can't go there. They fucking ruined it. Some dude, I saw an article the other day. He's a gubernatorial candidate, I want to say in Wisconsin, went down and got into a physical altercation with the director of the Butterfly Center, like as he was trying to chase down a QAnon conspiracy that he thought was legitimate.
So wait, what is the butterfly? I missed the connection between the Butterfly Sanctuary and the QAnon conspiracy. What's the connection?
Well, I think
just open your eyes, Kyle. It's right there.
Is that where all the lizard people are hatched or something? Like, what is it? Yeah.
Well, I think Kyle realized that the QAnoners can make any leap in their minds. Anything's possible. It's like that Daft Punk song, Giorgio, like, once you remove your imagination of what music is, anything's possible. And then you start to click track on that fucking epic. Random Access Memories is one of the top 3 albums of all time. I'll say it right now.
Okay, that's just like your opinion, man. But anyway.
I'm sorry, it's not country, Kyle.
So the question is then. So the question that I have then is like, but what was the connection? Like, why is it overrun with QAnon now? Like, what did they claim it was? Like a. Do you remember?
No, I don't. Probably something related to children. I'm speculating, really.
So, speaking of politicians making political decisions, somehow our lieutenant governor has found a way to involve the state of Idaho with the border patrol missions, or border security missions, I guess I should say. And I'm not sure if that's in Texas or not, but the background of it is that the governor of Idaho his name is Brad Little, and he is, I mean, it's Idaho, right? He's pretty conservative. He's pretty conservative even for conservatives. But our lieutenant governor, Janice McGeehan, is a 3%er QAnon. She's actually running for governor against the incumbent Republican governor because he's not Republican enough. And her first commercial, and next time I see it, I'll record it and send it to you guys, or I'll just find it on fucking YouTube, I guess, right? But the entire commercial is basically Donald Trump loves me and I love him. Please vote for me to be the governor of Idaho. And it might work because it is Idaho, right? Well, so Brad Little, when he leaves office, or when he leaves the state, whenever a governor leaves the state, the lieutenant governor assumes authorities of the governor. Just like if the president goes under for surgery, the vice president assumes the role of president, but it's mostly ceremonial. Nothing ever really happens. And when Brad Little left for a the Republican Governors Convention, Janice McGeehan drafted an order to mobilize the Idaho National Guard and send them to the border to work on the border mission. Like, she has zero authority to do that. I think one other time the first time she assumed the authorities, or the second time she assumed authorities, she tried to ban mask mandates or something like that. Like, she doesn't understand role playing that is acting governor, and I think to a point it actually wound up down in Texas where they were ultimately trying to hang out with your people, Mik.
So yeah, you touched on a couple things I want to just comment on real quick. So the border mission that we're talking about OLS today, OLSS, OST, but it's not exclusive to Texas. It's not exclusive to the Southwest region or to the South Texas region. Listeners may remember a few years ago in Arizona, there is active duty troops going out in an effort to kind of secure the Arizona border, right? Similar operations, setting up OPs for interdiction, all that crap. So just keep that in mind when you're out there thinking about what we're talking about today. This isn't just a Texas thing. Other states sending troops to Texas, not uncommon. When I was there, there was an aviation task force Liberty, that had basically aviators and aircraft from other states, other National Guards. At one point it was like Kansas, another point it was like Louisiana, that were sending pilots, crews, and birds down to the South Texas region to support this greater thing. And essentially they had Blackhawks down there that were acting as troop transports to do air assault for like some high-speed Border Patrol agents on drug interdictions and primarily drug interdictions in the middle of fucking the United States, right? So you had Texas Department of Public Safety troopers fast roping from a Black Hawk on someone's private land to interdict someone that they believe has, probably illegally entered the United States. 9 times out of 10, that's probably what occurred. But makes you wonder, what are we spending money on? Other governors, I've seen articles where potentially Michigan, maybe a Midwestern state, someone's governor spent, I don't know, like $700,000 to send like 2 platoons of soldiers to the border for like 2 weeks, right? Insane amount of money. What influence are 2 platoons of troops from your state, they're all probably guard bums as well. What are they going to do on the border to really, stop what's going on in Iowa or some shit?
They're going to secure like 10,000 votes for that governor. That's what they're going to do.
It's all politics, baby.
Political stunt. Don't you like human beings being used as tools to get somebody elected?
Good thing we don't do that in like Central Asian countries or anything like that.
No. Just South America, south of our border.
Real quick, Zach called out in the chat something about game wardens. I do want a quick story about a ride along I did with some game wardens. We were driving on a wildlife preserve on a trail in a truck, and there was a turtle in the tire track, and he ran over it. And I was like, I think you ran over a turtle. And he's like, no, I didn't. And I was like, dude, you ran over a turtle. And so he stopped and he got out and he saw the turtle he ran over. He was like, shit. And he kicked it into the grass and he said, don't tell anyone. And we kept driving.
Dude.
I don't need fish cop up my ass telling me where I can and can't throw a line.
Yeah, seriously. I'll use as many damn flies as I want to on my rig. I'm telling you.
My taxes pay your salary, bud.